Hey everybody, Richard and I just finished filming an interview with Ty and Moose from Andalusia Distillery, and those guys are the best. And I think it got a little spicy at a couple points. Anyways, I hope you enjoy. Let us know.
So you got some things poured out in front of us. I guess we're doing some testing of different barrels?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Sounds like a plan. What?
Okay. So this is a very rare sneak peek at our upcoming Palo Duro release, which is 100% malted Texas-grown Texas barley.
Texas grown, Texas malted, yeah.
Texas everything.
All of it.
All Texas. Right on the edge of the Palo Duro Canyon in Wildorado. This is not smoked. This is all new oak, number 3 char, if I'm not mistaken. Chocolate malt, Munich malt, and just the Palo Duro malted Maverick malt. Everything grown by Maverick Malt House and malted by them. So this is a little over 3 years, so I believe 38 months, and cask strength, I do not know what that strength is.
Yes.
It's stronger than bottle.
Yeah, probably 110, 115, I'm guessing, just kind of what was going on back then.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah. And it's kind of fun because we get to actually get some Texas terroir here. You know, I mean, so much malt comes from northern states, and so it's fun to kind of get malt grown in a completely different part of the country, and then malted in a completely different part as well. So it's the Panhandle has got that unique, cool, dry air where they can malt successfully. Mm-hmm. It'd be a little harder to malt. Especially outdoors or in a open malting situation in our geographic area.
Getting some interesting flavors, like there's a tea note in there, but I'm also getting a chocolate note.
That would be from the chocolate barley.
Yeah.
It's
So all of our Moose, all of our specialty malt comes from Maverick, and so that's the and for all of the whiskeys we make.
right.
So there's a little Texas in all of our whiskeys, so they're Munich malt and they're chocolate malt, and so those are important accent malts for our mash bills, and so that's what the chocolate you're getting is that Maverick chocolate.
That big chocolate bomb that comes out in Striker, that's
Right.
Maverick chocolate malt.
There's a bitter orange peel in there as well.
This definitely leans closer into bourbon territory for people that they think they're not malt fans, but they actually are. They just haven't found it yet.
Yeah,
How many years?
and that was me for a long time, to be honest. Yeah,
Me too.
Yeah,
That's how I came to this
Just
place.
not really a bourbon guy. I just didn't think I liked whiskey, and discovered malts, and holy crap, yeah.
How many years have you been at this, Ty?
So craft beer for about 15 years, and whiskey for about 8 years.
So production has increased. You were saying this Palo Duro is going to be a really big production.
Yeah, we've always had a core 3 lineup of whiskeys, and it's our triple distilled, our Revenant Oak, and our Striker. And what we kind of hope to do over the course of the many years is to kind of introduce at least kind of one big fun project that we've been working on to the general public. And so we hope to see Palo Duro released to a much wider audience in the coming years, and then whiskeys like Bottle and Bond maybe in the near future as well. And so that'll be our challenge, is kind of predict what we want to introduce and what people are going to want to drink 3 or 4 or 5 years from now. In the beer world, it was a lot easier, right? We had to predict what you wanted to drink a month from now.
Right.
But now we have to look ahead 3 or 4 years, and so it's a lot more planning involved.
So the first bottled in bond whiskey in Texas was from this distillery.
Thank you, sir.
I have a bottle.
The first bottled in bond rum from this distillery too.
Also,
There
by
you
the way. Yeah. Just throwing it out there. Yeah.
So I've got a bottle unopened in my cupboard. I still haven't had a chance for you to sign it.
Bring it over. Yeah, no, that's a special whiskey for us. That's one whiskey where no smoke in that one. We really showcase the chocolate malt and the specialty grains. Specialty grains are well known in the beer world. Really the differences of color of all beers comes from the different roasted and kilned barleys that they'll use. And in the distilling world, it's just something that just never really occurred to them. I even, getting into distilling early on in the brewing world, I had a lot of distillers tell me those flavors don't come through in distillation even. And I thought, surely not. You know, I mean, anything will come through in distillation. And so we make, we make very interesting whiskeys that beer lovers would appreciate. And that's kind of where my background came from. I was open. My eyes were opened from a distiller that was a former craft brewer who was using a lot of specialty malts, and all these interesting flavors really add to the complexity of the whiskey.
So
and it's a quick and easy way. I wouldn't say easy, but most flavors of a basic spirit or a basic malt are really determined in aging and take years and years and years. Whereas a mash bill, you can influence that flavor right up front from day one.
Yeast is also going to be playing part of that as well.
Absolutely. Yep. We play around with a lot of fun yeast options. We're lucky enough to have some good friends at some very large breweries right down the road, and so we've experimented with beer yeasts. We're also using traditional Scotch whiskey yeasts as well. Sometimes you want to use yeast that will produce certain flavors, and then sometimes you want them to perform in certain temperatures. For example, beer yeasts love 68 degrees to ferment. Maybe 75, not much higher. And in the Texas summer, that's kind of tough to do sometimes. So in the summertime, maybe we'll use a yeast that's more appreciates the 90 degrees or something like that. And we don't have to do as much chilling of our beer during the heat of the summer.
Now in beer, there's top fermentation, bottom fermentation for ales and lagers. Are you doing any of those types of experiments with?
Yeah. So lager yeast is probably the one area of yeast that's probably the least explored because it is a very high sulfur producing yeast. Oh. So even some of my favorite Pilsner lagers, the real hoppy craft lagers, will have a little hint of sulfur to them. Obviously, you can push that too far; it's undesirable. But they're higher sulfur producing. They're also very cold fermenting. So lager yeast tend to like 50 degrees. I talked about 68 for beer yeast. That's ale yeast.
Right.
So lager yeast would be more like 50. And it's too hot around here for us to be doing that. We don't even want to try it. So, but I'd love for to try a whiskey made from a lager yeast and for someone to push that envelope. Won't be us, but we'll do other things.
You probably have to use a lot of copper to strip out some of that sulfur as well.
There you go. Yep, lots of copper contact.
Yeah. Also, the specialty grains that you were talking about, is it varietals as well as malting, or is it just malting that creates those varietals?
Not as much varietals. We can, and sometimes do, order and request varietals for special batches like Palo Duro, but specialty malts are pretty much just standard malts. If anything, sometimes in the larger brewing world, they're inferior malts that maybe weren't really meant for prime time, so they'll roast them. And so the contribution that they give is more their color than their extract, for example.
You hear a lot about 2-row and all of these different...
2-row, 4-row, 6-row.
Yeah.
And
So that's just essentially the number of seeds on the stalk and the way that it piles up on the end of the grain.
Exactly. And traditionally, 6-row malt would have higher enzyme contents. And so you would find bourbon manufacturers would like these kind of malts because corn really has no enzymes. Wheat has a good bit, but then you'd get most of your enzymes from the barley.
Right.
If you're not using wheat and you're using rye, at that point barley is your only source of enzymes to convert all of your corn and all of your rye, unless you're adding artificial or natural extra enzymes to it. That's all you're going to have. And so they went for really high enzymes. But you really don't want to make a beer out of 100% 6-row. It's really not the best barley out there for flavor and extract and yield. So it just happens to have a bunch of enzymes.
What are some of these enzymes that you're talking about, and what do they do in terms of flavor at the final stage?
Sure, yeah. They're not quite as much about flavor as more performance and yield. And so you're talking about amylases, alpha amylase and beta amylase specifically. And those are the enzymes that are found naturally in barley, but they don't really do anything in room temperature in dry situations. But once they are in the presence of water, and once they're in that 150-ish, got maybe a 6 or 8 degree range around 150 degrees, that those enzymes become active. And alpha and beta amylase have separate active or separate ideal temperatures, but you just kind of try to split the middle between them. And they both will break down the branches of starch in different ways down into sugar. And by using both at the same time, one enzyme gobbles up ends of a chain and one enzyme breaks the chain shorter. So you need both happening at all times to break down a very complicated starch chain into a very simple sugar molecule.
So there's chemicals that do carry flavor in distillation. They give you some of those fruit notes.
Yep.
And I believe that some of those fruit notes come through because of the yeast and the way that the fermentation happens.
Most of your flavor compounds will be produced by yeast. These are esters. These esters will also be oxidized by alcohols, and you have a lot of interesting interactions between esters and alcohols, but the yeast is primarily driving the ester formation for sure.
So isoamyl acetate, I think that's the banana flavor.
All the good ones, yeah.
And the apple and pears.
Acetylaldehyde,
there we go.
which is also a very well-known hangover-causing compound. So you don't really want a lot of that stuff on there very much at all. So
Cool. Yeah, that's a lot of science.
yeah, cool. Thanks for that. Yeah.
What did you just pour there, Moose?
This is.
Ooh, that is rich.
This is Economy Liquors single barrel pick, and this is a triple distilled Irish style whiskey that went through primary maturation in a Pedernales port barrel and then was transferred to a striker barrel that previously held Irene Tan's single barrel striker pick. And they did
you follow that?
Musical,
Yeah.
They did a whole musical chairs with their barrels. So somebody aged one whiskey in one barrel, somebody aged another whiskey in another barrel, and they said at our last anniversary party, we should really mingle these two things together. So they switched barrels. We pulled the liquor out of both barrels, put them in the opposing barrels.
Without mixing them, but
Right. And now they are going through their finishing. So this is an Irish style triple distilled whiskey that went through full maturation in a port barrel and is now being finished in a striker barrel. Mm-hmm. Whereas Irene's barrel is a striker that is being finished in a port barrel that previously held triple distilled Irish style single malt.
Wow.
Did you get that? There will be a test here pretty soon.
I think you have to put a letter with every bottle.
But this is the nerdiness and that I love about the whiskey community. We had two folks here on the happened to be the same day who have both picked a barrel from us, and they're coming to test and nurture their barrels, and they've decided that they're going to swap liquid between their barrels. I mean, it's just brilliant. I love it. And so you have a liquor store in Galveston, Texas, and a liquor store in Connecticut swapping liquid in their barrels. I mean, that's just brilliant. And that would never happen in any other industry in the spirits world right now. Whiskey is just so dynamic and so fun.
Yeah, there's a certain point where it's too big to experiment, or you've got something going, you don't want to mess with the formula, and there's a lot of major brands where they just come in and they push a button. And that's how this still works today. Yeah,
and there's only so many special things that makers or Jim Beam can come up with. I mean, their job is to produce a massive volume of very consistent product. And our job is to just have fun.
So I've had a lot of people in tastings, and they say, Texas whiskey just costs too much. When you're comparing it to something like Jim Beam, they're able to purchase train loads of grain and have train loads of grain being dumped into silos on their property
Every day.
every single day, and they're going through them on an ongoing basis. They have their own granaries that are holding the product that they're milling and fermenting.
They've got column stills, which are way more efficient.
A lot more efficient. Yeah. So when you're sitting here looking at a smaller place, the economy of scales, if you're buying by the pound, grain by the train load, it's going to be a lot cheaper by the pound. If you're getting it by the truckload, it's going to be a little bit cheaper. If you're getting it by the bag or by the pallet, it's going to be a little more expensive.
It's very expensive.
Yeah, so that's where it's like, how much grain are we buying? I believe, Moose, you said the same thing with molasses, that the molasses, when you're buying it by a tote, was
exponentially more
It was
expensive than
five times as much.
than buying it by a tanker truck.
Yeah, so the tanker truck.
But who all can accept a tanker truck of molasses? Not many folks. Yeah,
right.
I'm gonna take it though. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and take it.
Yes,
and
sir.
then the stills that you have here, you've actually upgraded, so now you're able to do a lot more volume than you used to do. So are you doing your stripping runs in a larger capacity and moving things to a lower capacity, or how are you managing the distillation now? How has it evolved and changed over time?
It definitely has gone from several stripping runs a week or first run distillation runs all through the week, and then 2 final distillation runs at the end of the week to make about 2.5 barrels to
all in the same still.
Yeah. Everything in the same stills and
So
running
you
out
got
of
to clean it in between
3
runs
fermentation
and-
tanks. That's a day of cleaning, and if it's not a day of cleaning, it's definitely 4 days of just mass confusion and running around like a crazy person to make everything work right within a 6-day period. And now it is, we've got one big 1,000 gallon still that does the work of what our 250 gallon still used to do in 2 days and 4 distillations. So that keeps us running where we can strip out the equivalent of 4 stripping runs in one go round and have enough distillate to make finishing runs every day of the week, 5 days a week. Right now we've gone from 2 to 2.5 barrels a week to anywhere from 8 to 10 barrels a week, depending on fermentation, whether we're running whiskey or brandy or rum. Brandy and rum yield more alcohol, so we're going to get a little more out of it. But right now on the whiskey end of things, we're doing about 8 barrels a week. Sometimes a little more if,
That's quite a
things
lot
are
more.
smiling. If the cosmos is smiling on us.
When I first visited, Ty, I think you were saying 1 to 2 barrels a week.
That was it.
And that was what you were filling. So, 8 barrels is quite the amount. And 4 years from now, those will be mature.
And we are all very soon on the track to do 12 a week, probably. We've got some brew house upgrades coming soon, yet to be announced. And then once those happen, we'll be 50% higher than we are now. So it's very exciting.
Cool.
And it's a lot less sweaty hard work, too.
For you and I, for sure.
Isn't that nice? Yeah.
Andrew's a little brutal, but you know.
Yeah.
You got to pay dues, man.
Yeah.
Corey's going to be running the drone through, and we were looking forward to getting through the barrel house and looking through and seeing all the cool stuff over there. So that's going to be a fun little tour of the property. And we're also going to be sitting down and having some supper after this, because you got to fill up the belly afterwards. And you've got some new food here.
We do. Yep, Speakeasy Grill is an incredible, talented team. They used to run the food out at Albert, Texas. If anybody's familiar with Albert, a little bar. It's a town that's a bar. It's kind of cool.
And there's a dance hall?
Yep. And
That's it. That's Albert.
And they ran High Cider, a very, very, very talented chef. And so we've had probably 40 or 50 different food trucks here over the last 7 or 8 years. And these folks are as good or better than any of them, and now they're permanent with us. So we're very excited to have that food option here.
Yeah, you used to have quite a few food trucks coming through here on the weekend.
And God bless them all. I know it's a very hard thing to do, and so attendance was tough sometimes, and no shows, and quality of food would vary. And I get it. It's a hard thing to do. So we're lucky to have found a really talented chef couple, both male and female chefs, really rocking it for us. So
I gotta say that last one was fantastic.
what else, Moose? You got one more for us?
We've got one more. I've got this little tiny. Woo! Look at that.
All right, we'll edit that out.
No way, that's going live right now.
Fuck yeah.
That's going out.
Please do. That'll be good.
Extra content. That was really good. That port wine really, it was almost like plums and dates and so much
When
fun.
that
Yeah.
that was that's the economy.
Yes.
I mean, when it was in its primary barrel, it looked like red wine.
It
we were like, what? This is a problem.
compared to
You
these
know?
other ones, it is still fairly
It's still
ruby
dark,
red.
but it was way even more
Yeah.
red winey.
that just looks like a really
than
old
it is
new
now.
barrel
Yeah,
whiskey.
yeah. Now it looks like a good bourbon or something, but
It
it was
was,
like pink. I mean, it was.
I've had some red wine whiskeys that have tasted like flat, stale, leftover in the glass type of red wine,
And probably a funky barrel.
yeah. The finish was sort of
Wine
flat.
barrels go funk within days of
Yeah.
emptying them. I mean, there's not enough alcohol in there to keep it fresh.
Yeah, so we were talking
Can you hand
to
me
a
that
couple
one?
places, and some of them are putting alcohol in it when they're transporting
I would,
it.
yeah.
They're
Pour a
leaving
bottle
it.
of Everclear in there. Fuck yeah, absolutely. Or like when we get sherry barrels, we get maintenance wine.
Okay.
They call it maintenance wine. It is the thickest, syrupiest sherry you've ever seen in your life. Mm-hmm. But it just maintains the barrel for shipping and stuff like that.
Okay.
There's
so
maybe like 2 or 3 liters in a barrel when we get it. Yeah.
I know a
On
lot of
average, for sure.
a lot of the bourbon barrels that go to Scotland are disassembled and then shaved and toasted and recharred
Yeah.
and reassembled when they get there.
To a different size, even
Yeah.
sometimes, and that's why they're the funny shape. Because they were meant to be 53, but then they make them like 60 gallons or something by adding more staves. But it's going to be a funny shape then at that point. It's going to be like swelled, you know.
So sherry and port are from Portugal, so those are going to have to be shipped to you overseas, or you're
Big time.
most likely working through a broker,
Yep.
a third-party broker, to bring that product in.
Barrel broker, yep.
And so have you seen inconsistencies in what you're getting?
For sure. The sherry barrel market has really, it reached its peak within the last couple of years, and it got to the point where, because, the production of sherry for a long time has been doing this, and the production of scotch for a long time has been doing this.
Right.
And, for the longest time, all scotch was aged in sherry barrels. And then when the American market, discovered scotch, it was pretty brilliant, really. They started buying bourbon barrels, which were really palatable to the bourbon consumer. And so it really worked. Not only did they find a whole new supply of barrels, it worked for the market that they were trying to sell it in. But now, man, sherry barrels have become a really hard thing to find. So there's a lot of, I wouldn't say fake sherry barrels, but these
Remanufactured.
Yeah, they recreated.
Yeah,
perhaps.
they're remade barrels,
these
man.
sherry bodegas keep these barrels for like 30 years. They're
Yeah.
using them. I mean, so you're really, unless one of them literally goes out of business, you're not going to get a real sherry barrel.
Yeah.
Ever. And so they're reproducing them by taking old Spanish wine barrels, rebuilding them, soaking sherry in them for a few months, and then selling them. It produces a really nice product. It's a great stopgap. I'm sure it's not the same, right?
Right.
It's something that's been in a bodega for 30 years.
Yeah, I know the same thing happens in cognac and Armagnac. They keep their casks
Yeah.
for a very long time.
Until they don't hold liquid in.
Until they're worthless.
Yeah.
Like our Madeira barrels we finally got out of Hack. Hack is one of the few wineries in the United States, I think the only one in Texas, that can say Madeira on a bottle of dessert wine.
Right.
Because they've been doing it since the 80s. And they've got in a stufa, like an oven, like in the attic of the garage that they pick barrels up in, and they increase the temp to where it's like 140 year-round up in this attic. And they bake the wine, just like Madeira. And it's beautiful stuff. And so we've been able to get some of those barrels. But
Yeah.
even those, they gave them to us because they were afraid they were going to start leaking.
Right.
It's like shit.
And they start leaking
And
on
they-
us.
and they
There's a
started
reason we
leaking,
don't
yeah.
have any.
Well, what do you know?
You know?
Now,
But,
the type of wood that they use for wine and the type of barrels, they tend to be a little bit bigger. They tend to be like French oak or narrower grains or better
A little more
constructed.
tannic.
Yep.
Yeah, so the
More
flavors
tannic.
come through, you're going to get those more barrel spices from a French oak. So those are really interesting to see. And I've seen some sherry casks, like, what is that, 700 liters are huge.
Yep, 500. Yep, easily. And I think that's what our two big they call them butts.
Those two out there are 500 liters.
500 liter butts, I think.
Yeah. I had somebody ask me what a demi-john was, and it's like,
oof, boy, yeah.
It's
You get up into puncheons and all kinds of fun sizes. Yeah.
Who are you talking to? Like,
I talked to some people.
A 19th century Brit?
Yes.
Because that's where all this comes from.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, but it's some kind of measurement, and it's like I had to look it up myself. But yeah, that's the world that we're in when we're having conversations. People are bringing up terminology,
and sometimes it gets thrown around loosely too.
Yeah.
So you never really know.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's the thing, because it's like, where is the person at that you're talking to? Are they at a basic level of instruction, or are they at a high level instruction? Have they done it themselves? Have they done brewing or fermenting?
Were they misled by a barrel broker? You know, I mean,
and it's your job to meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
And then bring them forward. But don't inundate them with too much knowledge sometimes.
Yeah, that's the thing with the liquor stores when we're doing tastings there. It's you've got people from multiple knowledge levels where they'll walk in and you'll say a term and it's like, well, I thought that was only from here, or I thought that was only made out of X, and it's like, yeah, there is some discrepancy. People have misconceptions about different things. Myself, like the stupidest thing, the first time I heard 4 shots, it's like, that seems like an arbitrary measurement, taking 4 shots off of the still.
Yeah. But hey, it really does something.
Does it depend on the size of the still, or do you use a bigger shot?
So.
You use a bigger shot glass when you're
giant shot glasses, 3-gallon shot glasses.
No, it's true.
American Single Malt is a category that you guys are muddling in mostly. You've done brandy, you've done other things, but recently, in the past couple of years, and you've been at the forefront of this, creating this American Single Malt category amongst others in the field. Would you let people know a little bit what American Single Malt is, a category, and how you see that progressing?
Yeah, for a long time, it was kind of tough to categorize our products to retailers and to customers. And so for a while it was, well, it's kind of like Scotch, but it's, Scotch has to come from Scotland. And so it's like Scotch, but it's made here. And so it was always sort of a gimmick a little bit. It was like, oh, you're trying to do what they're doing, but you're doing it here, I get that. And so now, there's enough of us doing this that in a very creative way that is not happening in Scotland. They're doing a lot of cool stuff, don't get me wrong, but it's very traditional for American producers of anything in the artisanal form to take something classic and usually European and bringing it home and making it our own. And that's what we're doing with American Single Malt. We're bringing Scotch home to America and we're making it our own. And so whether or not that means using peat from the Northwest, which is what Westland's doing, or we're using smoking barley from mesquite, which is distilleries in Arizona and New Mexico, and we're doing. And so just kind of making it our own, making it American. Mm-hmm. We don't want it to be Scotch. I love the whole concept of the Japanese whiskey market and the program they have, but they're really not trying to do anything creative, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but they're really just trying to re-perfect Scotch,
right?
That's a great idea. It's very challenging, but awesome. And we're not even thinking about doing that. Mm-hmm. We're not thinking about recreating Scotch whatsoever. All of our spirits are going to be different, but it also then gives us a home, like a place, like at your average bar on the menu, or at your liquor store on the shelf, where you're going to start seeing American Single Malts, whole shelves of them. Because right now it's still tough for us sometimes on a classic cocktail menu or whiskey list that says bourbon, Scotch, Irish, or whatever. We're none of those, you know.
Right.
And so where do they put us? And so it's always been a challenge for them too. And so I think the actual recognition and designation by the American government of the American Single Malt is going to be huge for our industry for sure.
So in a few different liquor stores, they're all categorizing it sort of haphazard their own way. In one liquor store, you walk in and you see Texas as a category.
I appreciate that. That's a
Yeah.
great start. You know, we see that in a lot of Total Wines. They've got either Texas spirits or Texas whiskey. And I appreciate the hell out of that because that helps a lot. Now you might have ryes and bourbons and wheats and malts in that category, and so you're going to need to know what the difference between those are. But at least you know this is a local spirit that I can support local if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, I do enjoy seeing that category as Texas, but there's so much that is happening in Texas that it can be a little bit muddy. And other stores I'm walking in and I'm seeing American Single Malt under American whiskey. So you've got bourbon separated from rye, separated from wheat or whatever it is. Wheat tends to be on the American side usually, but people come in and they're put into two major categories. This is where the Scotch is. This is where the bourbon
is, right? Yeah. What else is there?
Irish and Canadian are in the back. Yeah,
all the other
others.
And that's sometimes what we find ourselves is with the Japanese whiskey or with the other craft whiskeys, and so it can be challenging unless you're seeking that section out. You're probably not even going to see us, and so we really appreciate the vendors that kind of will highlight Texas. Anything local in Texas is obviously great for us. And then American Single Malt is something I've rarely seen, but I think we will see. That's going to be the new standard going forward.
Within the next few
Bourbon,
years, for
Scotch, American Single Malt.
Right.
Those are going to be the three categories you're going to see. Yep.
I was talking to Moose earlier because I was doing a tasting over the weekend. It's right after 4th of July. And I saw someone come in from Garrison Brothers, saw someone come in from Still Austin, and they're going into the liquor stores and they're cleaning up their displays and they're making sure the stuff is stocked. They're going into the back, making sure there's no back stock that's hidden somewhere, or if there was a special release, it's not sitting up on a top shelf and hiding for another month where nobody's pulled it down because it looked exactly like something else, but it was, a signature release or something like that.
You're familiar with the industry, apparently.
I remember you had a taster that was out there, and she was describing the three whiskeys in a wonderful way. I just loved it.
Oh no! Here we go.
I just loved the way it was set up. She said the Revenant. It was, and she actually had the sherry cask of the Striker.
Yeah, probably Total Wine.
It was the triple distilled, and she says this is a whiskey that I want to read a book to. And then she said to the next one, she went and brought the Revenant Oak out. This is the whiskey that I want to write a book because it's going to spur my imagination.
Okay.
And then she said with the Striker, she says, I'm done with my day. I'm sitting down with this glass of whiskey.
That's actually pretty clever. I like that quite a bit. Yeah.
And that's.
I thought you were going to tell me a horror story.
No,
there
not at all.
That was pretty great.
Okay, good.
But
That was on the good end of things.
Yeah, communicating with the consumer and trying to get them to understand, where does this fit in my shelf, or how do I introduce this to my friends or family?
People need more help in the spirits world than any other category by far, by multitudes. I think wine consumers are fairly well educated in varietals and regions. Beer consumers know their beer. Half of them make their own beer at home, right? Making spirits at home is illegal, so that's not an option. And so there's you don't have that home brewer base that we had in the beer world. The more we could nerd out about our beers in the beer world, the more our consumers loved it. In the whiskey world, you got to be careful nerding out because there's no basis of knowledge there.
Right.
And I think the consumer that walks into a bar and orders a spirit is the most intimidated, ignorant. They have no idea what they want, and so they just call out something that they're used to hearing their friends order or whatever, and
Seen it on a movie, on a TV show.
It's so intimidating.
Yeah. There is
And bars are rarely helpful.
yeah.
Almost never helpful in this situation.
It's a certain thing with name brand recognition, and also sort of like, having the little alligator on your shirt type of thing. It says something about you.
Brand loyalty.
Yeah.
Whatever.
When you order something that is perceived as exclusive or expensive, because I'm a person that can appreciate exclusive.
And instead of us fighting over Jim Beam and Jack Daniels and Evan Williams, let's talk about bourbon versus Scotch versus rye and figure out what we like in the first place. And then we can then get down to brands after that. But the whiskeys are so different in their categories that it's, sometimes I see whiskey competitions or tastings that try to compare like a Scotch and a bourbon. I'm like, how can you possibly do that? You're comparing the best apple juice to the best orange juice in the same competition.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not even possible. And so it's tough.
You were talking about beer, and the inside of the beer world, there are people who go towards certain categories, and so every brewery that I go to, I want to try their IPA or I want to try their sour.
Sure.
And they basically they're on the hunt for the next IPA or the next sour. They probably are only going to get a 6-pack of that thing until they're on to the next brewery or their next location. And running a brewery, a lot of people don't realize it. The light beers and the seltzers and those are what keep the lights on.
Pay the bills, yeah.
Because people keep coming back for another case and another case and another case. So coming up with the next, like I went to a brewery with my wife on a trip. We stopped overnight with the trailer, and honestly, I think they had 12 beers, and I think 10 of them were IPAs.
Oh my God. Yeah, not surprised at all. And, for the longest time, when I first got into brewing beer in the early 2000s, the traditional brewers always talked about balance. Balance is critical for any food or drink you ever have. You want to balance sweet and salty and sour and umami and all these things together. And once you can balance all the sensory aspects of tasting together is when sometimes you can really find magical flavors, but you'd never want to be too salty or too sweet or too sour, any of those things. But in the craft beer world, we wanted to be too bitter. We didn't give a shit about balance. Fuck balance. I want to melt your face with hops, right? I mean, that was our goal for a decade or maybe two, and it was great. Loved every minute of it. Today I can't touch a beer with American hops.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not an IPA. Probably not. I was telling Moose I had some Sierra Nevadas the other day, and they were.
Yeah.
That's not a particularly hoppy beer anymore, and they were too hoppy for me. And
Right.
and so like once you push your palate in extremes for too long, you're gonna have to move on. You're gonna have to change gears. You're gonna get tired of it,
Right.
because it's not balanced. And I think you'll see this in the craft beer world. The craft beer world has had 20, 30 years of fun and sometimes easy money, where anybody making beer could do well.
Right.
But now people have been oversaturated with things like hops and sours, another one that it's just a tougher industry now, a lot more competitive.
I'm seeing that.
And then they're all coming full circle back to like classic styles,
Right.
Like hoppy lagers,
Yes.
which is what we all rebelled against. Not really hoppy, but we rebelled against the cheap American lagers,
Right.
The Budweisers, Coors, all that stuff, in the 80s and 90s.
Pilsners.
Yeah, Pilsner was a bad word, right? Because that was Bud or whatever. And so, but now we've rediscovered the fact that Pilsner can be a really hoppy thing, but not American hops, German hops. So very different flavor profile. I think it's the American hop profile that has pushed people beyond the limit, or soon will push people beyond the limit. But it takes 10 years of crushing IPAs to get tired of them. So, hey, we still got a little while left. We're not going to all go back to drinking Coors Light tomorrow, but I think we've seen the zenith in
Right.
craft beer, and took 30 years to get here. It's going to take 30 years to go away. So there's still time, but I think we're going to start start thinking about things like balance again.
Right. The same thing's sort of happening in the whiskey world too. And in the YouTuber world, you've got people who are just in love with a category. So bourbon, bourbon, bourbon. I'm only going to talk about bourbon. I'm walking past American Single Malt, and I'm not going to talk about it because that's not in my category.
Right.
Then you've got the people.
How long can you do that?
Yeah. Then you've got the people who are like ultimate explorers, who are always searching for that next new thing, that next craft, that thing that nobody else is talking about. That And for me, I'm more of an explorer. I want to.
Me too.
Yeah.
I always want to know what's next. Yeah. I don't give a shit what's right now. What's next? Yeah.
And there is a lot going on out there in the world, but again, I'm fearful of there's too much of the crafts, and people are going to get
In the
lost.
spirits world, or
in the spirits world.
You already think that's happening?
Yeah, I've seen last November a lot of major brands being shrunk down on the shelf.
Because of competition, or
I think a lot of it has to do with sales volume. I think the liquor stores are looking at what moves and what doesn't.
of course, that's all they look at.
And if it's
Zero,
not,
that's period. Yeah.
If it's not moving, that Amaret peated has been here for how long, and
Doesn't matter how delicious it is, because they take no role in promoting any of it.
Right.
And I mean, what kind of store? I'm going to pick on some liquor stores here. What kind of store just is like open up and just does? Imagine a restaurant that just has just some stuff on the menu, and they will tell you nothing about the food. They're not going to recommend anything.
Yeah.
What do you like? It's just going to be fucking hamburgers or whatever. Right. It's just like, dude, we rely on chefs and specially trained people to tell us what they think might be good and what you might like.
Right.
And that's what liquor stores do not do ever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 1% of them.
But there's multiple layers.
They walk in you walk in and they ask what you want,
right?
Not what would you like, what are you interested in? And every now and then you find the nerdy guy that might help you out and stuff. But man, I just wish they would give more help.
There used to people coming in and saying, "I need that peanut butter. You got the peanut butter
I want
whiskey?
the Crown Apple or the peanut butter." these are all very successful brands. I get it.
Yeah.
But I think if people kind of had like some better recommendations, maybe that's not the right word, but like some more recommendations besides what do you want? Here it is.
Yeah.
Hey, this is you like this? Hey, this is a really fantastic thing.
That's the way to go.
Right.
And I just getting into distillery, I just thought stores are going to be that way. Wow, big disappointment on my part.
It's really tough because you've got multiple layers that are going. Like, you've made the product, it's your baby. You put it on a pallet, you send it to the distributor, and it can just sit in their warehouse. Like, you need to make sure somebody else is making sure it gets into the store.
We're the ones that actually have to sell the product on the shelf at the liquor store, not the liquor store. And that was the big shocking part to me.
Yeah.
Was that I would be the one to have to walk in and play salesman for them.
Right.
Because that's how the industry works.
Yeah.
And can't explain why. That's how it is. And don't fight against it.
Yeah.
I'm done doing that. And so we've got to sell our product for us, despite the fact that it's exchanged hands several times in between myself and the consumer.
Yeah.
And what's funny is, in the Texas, you've got the 3, sometimes 4-tier system where you have to have a manufacturer, that's me, the distributor, which delivers the product to liquor stores. The payment schedule is dictated by law in many cases, but not in the case of a distributor who pays me. And so there's state laws that say when the liquor store has to pay the distributor, but there's no state laws about when the distributor has to pay me. And so it's actual state laws enforcing this. So like they can lose their TABC permit if they miss one payment.
Right.
But a distributor cannot pay me for 6 months and no one cares.
Right.
So what often happens is that like I'll make a product, I'll age it for 4 years, I'll sell it to a distributor. That distributor sells it to a liquor store. They get paid from the liquor store that day. I'm still not paid. The customer then buys the product from the liquor store. Liquor store gets paid. I'm still not paid. The customer then drinks the whole product and throws it in his fucking recycling bin. I'm still not paid.
Yeah.
The guy that invested 5 years ago in all this is still not paid.
Meanwhile, he's still got to pay me.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so that's the effed up part with the 3-tier system in Texas, is because for the longest time we had no one in the first tier.
Right.
There's all kinds of people in the distribution tier. You know, beer distributors are powerful families in the state. Mm-hmm. Don't even mess with them. They've been writing their own laws for generations. Mm-hmm. Liquor stores, they've been around a long time. So they've been writing their own laws. But and how long has there been brewers, wineries, distilleries in Texas? Only about 20 years. It's not very long. And so our laws are generations old to benefit distributors and retailers because we've been non-present for a long time. So we're trying to form lobbies. We're poor. We don't have money for lobbyists like Bacardi does, and so we're trying. Right. But it's going to be a long. Like we need to educate people to know these things and to help support us, and that's the challenge.
So we are in the middle of the hill country. It is one of the biggest wedding venues. So if I am the bartender for a wedding event, I can go to U-Haul, get myself a box truck, back it up to a liquor store.
How about that?
Fill it full all the way with beer, wine,
5,000 bottles.
Yeah, as much as I want. There's no limit coming from the liquor store.
No, sir.
When you come to this distillery and I'm going to buy a bottle today, can I get a case?
No, sir.
Absolutely.
No, sir. You can buy 5,000 bottles from a liquor store. You can buy 200 AR-15s. That's just a side point. Not to get political, but you can literally do that. But you cannot buy 4 bottles from me.
Well, we can't.
5 bottles. Yeah, 5 bottles. Yeah,
5?
Yeah, you can buy 4. And the overlords have granted us 4 bottles instead of 2.
Right. Last year it was 2.
Thank you to the overlords who have given us 4 bottles instead of 2. And again, you can buy 5,000 from a liquor store. You can buy 500 AR-15s, but only 4 bottles of whiskey from me.
So let's say.
So clearly, this is not a public safety concept. This is about who's getting profit and who's getting money and who's getting paid. And I get it. It's politics, and we're young industry. We're not good at politics, but I'm a big believer in what's right and what's wrong. And fuck the politics part of it. I'm interested in what's right and what's wrong. And you should be able to buy more than 4 bottles from me. So
let's say you've had a really, really good year here at the tasting room, and every day people are coming in, they're buying bottles, they're getting cocktails, they're hanging out, they're eating. In November, somebody knocks on your door and said you sold too much.
Oof. Luckily, that's never happened. Luckily, yeah.
There's a limit to how much alcohol you can sell.
We would have to shut down that day and then not have a Christmas. So that's where the laws in Texas are.
Amazing. Now, if you're
really benefiting the small consumer, and obviously being sarcastic here, and not benefiting the person that supports local agriculture and local family businesses, and they're just going to give it all to Bacardi. Is kind of how the laws are, and I sort of rule out Bacardi. It's not just them; it's just all the big brands.
Yeah. There's a lot of really big brands out there. There's Constellation brands. There's Pernod Ricard. There's Beam Suntory. So
Diageo.
Yeah. So there's a lot of big companies out there, and when a small craft distiller starts making waves and starts winning prizes on their product, eventually there's an expansion that needs to go on over here so that we can increase production, and you may end up getting a knock on the door saying, we like this idea of Texas whiskey, or we like this idea of American Single Malt, and it looks like you're trying to build new storage space, you're trying to put in new equipment. Do you need some extra money?
Yep. Absolutely. And so we were a 1-building facility that encompassed the tasting room, the production, the office, the bathrooms, everything. And at some point, we had to grow. And so about 2 years ago, we built 2 brand new buildings, 2 5,000 square foot buildings. One's nothing but rickhouse storage, so barrel storage. One houses our new 1,000-gallon Vendome still and our 1,000-gallon Vendome cooker and all of our new fermenters. And so we're able to devote a lot more space for storage now. We're kind of unique as well because all of our whiskey is made from rainwater. And so we don't have city services of water and wastewater. So we have to collect the water that falls on our roof. We've now doubled our roof space. So we've doubled our rainwater collection, which has been fantastic for us. So now every time 1 inch of rain occurs in this area, we get 8,000 gallons of water in the water tank. So that's a lot of whiskey bottles.
So to finance all of this, you did something interesting and unique. You started
Sorry, I was heading down that road. So
Yeah.
we did crowdfunding. So we did a bank loan funded effort on our new construction, but then we did crowdfunding for all of our new operating expenses. So the loan has allowed us to build this incredible new distillery. And once you have this giant new still, you can make a lot of whiskey, but that's a lot of grain and a lot of barrels. You know, we are a single malt whiskey distillery. Our grain is by far the most expensive grain in the industry. I mean, you talk about corn, even some of the fancy, bourbon distilleries near us, they're paying 10 cents a pound for corn. You know, we're paying, at massive bulk prices, 50 cents a pound for malted barley. So 4 to 5 times as much as those big name bourbon distilleries that are near us charging lots of money for their bourbon. So we're already have that disadvantage from up front, the fact that we've committed to malted barley. So the crowdfunding has been super critical for us to utilize the equipment that the loan has purchased for us. So we've got all this, awesome big still, the new cooker. So the crowdfunding is going to give us malt and barrels for the next couple of years. We've gone from filling 2 barrels a week to filling 8, and now we're capable of 12, and that'll be happening probably next year. So you're talking about a 4 to now 6 times increase, and so we're going to need some operating costs. And one of the great things about the crowdfunding campaign is that we now have 600 brand ambassadors. This is a common term in the industry, but to people who don't know that term, it's somebody that goes out in a part-time basis and promotes your brand, whether or not they're doing social media posts or whiskey tastings or private events or whatever. They might have several different brands, but what I'm saying is we have 400 or 500 investors in our company. And they're just so excited about investing and being an owner in a whiskey distillery. They're going to tell all their friends about it.
Word of mouth is everything, man.
They're going to tell every friend, hey, I own a piece of a whiskey distillery, and that's cool as shit. I got to be honest. That's very cool. It's authentic. It's badass. And so they're going to tell their friends about this. So they've become brand ambassadors for us. They've become salespeople for us. They're spreading the love of Andalusia because they're owners in Andalusia.
Right. So if you brought in outside investors or one of these big companies came in, they would probably start telling you how to operate your distillery and where to make improvements and where you're falling
And we
down.
wouldn't have the 500 ambassadors of individuals. And so it's great to bring, and again, that's maybe a small equity portion for us, maybe 10-20%. It's not a massive, but so it's enough for them to be important, but not like they don't change decisions that we make in the company, which is important. Very important.
Yeah, so that's one of the things. When we're going into the liquor stores, who's stocking those shelves, who's paying attention to it. We actually
shows up.
Yeah.
Some brands sell themselves, but that's maybe about 10% of the brand, probably less.
Right.
Of brands. And so I think most consumers would be shocked how much effort the actual producer is showing up. So when you're doing that tasting at the liquor store, that's not a liquor store employee.
Right.
That's an employee of the brand or someone the brand has hired to taste for them. And I always thought that was like at HEB when you go and get samples, they work for HEB, not at the liquor store. If you're getting samples, they don't work for the liquor store. And the liquor store depends on other people coming in to sell products for them. I had
Right.
no idea that was the model.
Yeah, a lot of the people that are
Well, and to be
yeah.
fair, some of these liquor stores aren't making a ton of money, so it's not like they're just being greedy. I
Right.
mean, this is how the model works.
Yeah.
And I had to understand that. So
Yeah, even myself, I'm learning a lot of this because there's one tasting company that essentially they're getting $25 to $30 an hour for a 3-hour tasting.
fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, but the 3-hour tasting, they've got to go and buy the bottles. So it's almost like the bottles are moving themselves, whether they sell them or not. Well, how many they sell doesn't matter. They're not getting incentives for how many they're selling.
And the whole thing is on the honorary system
Right.
a little bit, of how many did you sell? And it's kind of hard to really truthfully get to the bottom of what you sell. And so,
And unless you work for the company, you're not taking a look at back stock, you're not looking at stock levels, you're not looking at generating reorders, you're not looking at the presentation of the products on the shelves. There's a lot of Texas distilleries, and a lot of the people that we're bringing onto the show have been those brand managers working specifically for these different brands, and they're going out every single day, topping things up, pulling things down,
Yep.
making sure it's full, generating the reorder, and
that's what we've been bad at.
Yeah.
We focus so much on production. Make a fantastic whiskey.
yeah.
Make it and it will sell. Yeah, we hoped, and
But now we've got stock and time to concentrate on those things.
we
Right.
do. Yeah, finally.
And we do have a whiskey community that's really heavily invested in craft and heavily invested in what's happening in Texas. So we've been fortunate with the Whiskey Tribe, with their conversations
For sure.
and giving us a heads up. The Texas Whiskey Association, the Texas Whiskey Trail.
Critical.
Highlighting things. Jake Clements putting together the Texas Whiskey Festival has been a really big highlight. I'm watching the Houston Whiskey Social, the number of people who went there. We saw you there
Yep.
last year, and so Texas had its own little carved out spot, which was fun to see. But again, where is people's attention in that room? The Texas room was a little quieter than the main room.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to them about eliminating the Texas room.
Yeah, just put everybody.
This is off record, but it's on record. Yeah. Hey, it's just an opinion because I feel Texas wine has a reputation. Sometimes deserved, sometimes not.
Right.
There's some fantastic Texas wines out there. As a whole,
Yeah.
are they all fantastic? Well, no. And so, as a whole, do they compare against French wines and California wines? Probably not quite, but pretty close.
Right.
And so, I think we've got that reputation sometimes with Texas whiskeys. But man, I think it's time for us to be elevated to the rest of the whiskey world at this
I
point.
think even Tennessee fights that
Come on.
Kentucky whiskey
Yeah.
thing,
We've
man.
already passed them. Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
It turns into a fight with me sometimes when people come in and they dismiss a Texas whiskey or Texas whiskey as a category out of hand.
Because they had a bad one 5 years ago or
Right,
whatever.
right.
Yeah.
And
or an overaged one or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, it's like this whole Texas experience is more about people than it is about the whiskey. So if you diss Andalusia, you're dissing Ty, you're dissing Tommy, you're dissing Moose. Like, these are people to me.
Somewhat, and I appreciate that so much, but we'll never depend on that,
Yeah.
like in a business way. But I fully appreciate that very much because we are doing things what I feel is the right way.
Yeah,
There's a lot of Texas whiskey out there.
right.
And sometimes it's just like Kentucky bourbon dumped into a tank, and they put it in a bottle that it's shaped like Texas, and it says Texas whiskey all day long, and and it's not. So it sometimes can be frustrating.
Yeah. I'm so happy to have friends like these and be able to just drop in on a whim after
On a Monday?
On a Monday,
Yeah.
we had a cancellation and it's like, what are we going to do? We usually do tapings on Monday, so here we are, just dropping by a couple distilleries along the way. And you guys, you're like, I'm going to keep watching what you're doing, and I keep following what's going on, and I invite everybody to come over to Blanco, Texas, and get yourself some Andalusia whiskey. And the specialty releases are always my favorite. Heavy peated, heavy smoke striker, sherry bombs. And when
We'll
you get
always
the sherry
have at
bombs,
least 1 or 2 bottles that you cannot ever get in a liquor store.
yeah. So there's a reason to come here.
Always.
Yeah.